Hi listeners, welcome to Bedtime Historian. Shh. Lay down gently now. Breathe slowly. Let the world grow quiet around you. Because tonight, you are not in your room anymore. You are far, far away. In a place hidden from clocks. In a village where time never moved forward. They say, in the folds of a forgotten valley, where fog wraps the trees like woolen blankets, and the air is thick with the scent of moss and wood smoke, there lives a village with no ticking clocks, no sunrise chasing minutes, no sundial carving shadows into earth, just stillness and silence and something curious. The villagers called it Elderglen, a name passed from whispered lips to sleepy ears. A name known only to those who listen very closely. No time ever passed there, not in the way you and I know it. The sky remained painted in endless golden hour. Shadows stayed the same length. Children never outgrew their shoes, and the flowers never wilted. They bloomed forever in gentle silence. But among the stillness, among the unmoving leaves, and the clock towers whose hands refused to turn, lived a little girl, a quiet, curious soul named Elira. Elira was not like the others. While the world around her stayed still, she felt something moving inside her chest, in her dreams, in her bones. At night, when the stars hung frozen like beads in glass, she heard tick, 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 a soft, far-away ticking, like a heartbeat made of brass, calling to her from a place no one else seemed to know. She would wake in the stillness, breath quiet, hands folded under her cheek, eyes wide in the moonlight, listening. Tick, tick, tick. She told her father, the village timekeeper, a tall, gentle man with silvery hair and oil-stained fingertips. He had once wound the great clock in the village square. Before the cog stopped turning, before time fell asleep, he would listen patiently, smile kindly, and brush her hair behind her ear. "It's only a dream, my little bell," he'd say softly. "There is no ticking here. Not anymore." But Elira knew better. She knew dreams did not sound that real. Dreams did not echo through the floorboards or flutter behind the walls like winged things. She began to draw what she felt, tiny sketches on scraps of parchment, of gears and keys and strange hourglasses. She called them the forgotten hour. It became her secret, a time no one believed in, a moment that hid behind the stillness, waiting, waiting to be found. And then one day, on the quietest morning of all, when even the birds forgot to sing, she heard something new. Not the soft tick she always knew. No, this time it was a chime, low, metallic, distant, like the ringing of a bell from beneath the earth. Cheem. It came with the wind that passed through the village square, a wind that carried with it the scent of old copper and memories that didn't belong. Elira stood in the doorway of the clock tower, her bare feet on cold stone, her eyes following the path of the wind. She whispered, "Where are you taking me?" And the chime answered not in words, but in another soft bell tone. Cheem. The villagers didn't notice. They never did. Not even when the trees began to lean, or the clouds above bent slightly westward toward the old forest, the forest where no one walked anymore. They said time had once lived in that forest, before it turned its face away, before it vanished behind bark and fern. Elira packed her little satchel, just a candle, a silver key she'd found beneath her pillow one night, a drawing of a clock with no hands, and a ribbon from her mother's old cloak. She didn't tell anyone she was leaving, not even her father, because somehow, deep in her still chest, she knew he already understood. As she stepped into the forest, time shifted. It was faint, like the blink of an eye, like the way a dream fades before waking. But she felt it, a warmth behind her ears, a pulse beneath her soles, as if the very ground whispered, "She comes, she comes," and the trees opened, just slightly, to let her pass. The trees were not like the ones in her village. These were older, wiser. They had bark like folded paper, and their roots curled like sleeping cats. Elira walked slowly. Each step was careful, quiet, as though her feet didn't want to wake the path. The forest hummed softly, a hush of leaves and faraway wind. But underneath it all, yes, there it was again. Tick, tick, tick. It wasn't coming from her imagination. She was sure now. The ticking had grown clearer, not louder, but closer, like it was walking beside her, without form, without shadow. Every few steps she paused, not out of fear, but respect. It felt like the forest was listening, and she wanted it to trust her. Tiny golden motes floated through the air, like dust kissed by candlelight. They drifted around her, dancing in spirals, trailing behind her fingers when she reached out to touch them. And then she saw it, a tree unlike the others. It stood in a quiet clearing, covered in soft moss and watch springs. Yes, actual watch springs, delicate coils tangled in ivy, hanging like ornaments that glinted in the still light. The bark was carved, not by hand, but by time itself, little symbols, numbers in forgotten scripts, and tiny gears embedded deep, like fossils. Elira approached it slowly, and the closer she came, the louder the ticking became. Tick, tick, tick. It was coming from inside the tree. She pressed her palm gently against its trunk. It was warm, alive, like the tree itself was a heart, beating in secret. Suddenly, a soft mechanical sound echoed, a clicking, like a lock, turning, click, clack, click. The bark split, not violently, but gently, like a curtain being pulled aside, and behind it was a doorway, small, round, lined with brass, and carved with a single phrase, "Only she who listens may enter the forgotten hour." Elira's breath caught, not out of fear, but recognition. She had heard that line before, in her dreams, in the chimes that echoed in her sleep. She reached for the silver key in her satchel. It was cool to the touch, but the moment it neared the keyhole, it began to glow softly, with a warm, steady light. She turned it once. Click. The door opened inward, and beyond it, darkness. But not the frightening kind. No, this darkness felt safe, velvety, like the inside of a lullaby. She stepped inside, and the door whispered closed behind her. The air changed. It wasn't forest air anymore. It smelled like old parchment, worn leather, and brass that had just been polished. Tiny lanterns lined the path, flickering on as she passed. Soft amber glows, lighting the hallway like fireflies trapped in bottles. It was a tunnel of old stone and copper veins. Every few steps, a clock sat embedded in the wall. But none of them told the same time. Each had a different hour frozen on its face. 12:07, 3:44, 9:11. And above each clock was a plaque, etched into brass. The moment a song was forgotten, the hour a promise was broken, the second before a kiss, the final glance. Each one, a memory. Elira paused at each one. Some made her heart ache, some made her smile, but all of them ticked, yes, softly, Not loud, but real. Time was here, hidden, sleeping, waiting for someone to notice, and she was noticing everything. At the end of the tunnel, the path opened into a vast round chamber. It was carved like the inside of a giant clock. Gears bigger than houses lined the walls, some still, some slowly turning with an elegant grace. In the center, a pedestal. Upon it, an hourglass. But not like any hourglass she'd ever seen. It held not sand, but stardust, shimmering, floating, weightless. And beneath it, a plaque read, "The Forgotten Hour." Elira stepped forward. Her hands trembled, but her heart did not. She touched the glass, and at once, the room filled with chimes, soft, ringing, cascading like gentle bells falling from the sky. Light poured from the walls, from the gears, from the clocks. And then a voice. Not loud, not scary, just ancient, feminine. "You have found it, child, the hour that no one remembers, but everyone needs," Elira whispered. "Why me?" The voice replied, "Because you listened. While the world hushed its ears, you stayed awake." In the silence, Elira's eyes filled with tears, not sadness, not joy, but understanding. Something was awakening, and she was part of it. The chamber hummed with quiet energy, the kind that doesn't make noise, but moves through you, like warmth spreading from a cup of tea held in both hands. Elira stood before the hourglass, eyes reflecting the shimmer of stardust within. She didn't know how she had found this place, but she knew, somehow, that it had been waiting for her. A very long time. Around the room, gears the size of carriages turned, each with a rhythm that pulsed gently in the air. No clanking, no screeching, just the soft, soothing sound of purpose. It was here that time was still alive, not in the way clocks tell it, with hands and seconds, but deeper, older, like a whisper passed from tree to stone to wind. Elira turned slowly, her fingers grazing a wall of intricate dials. Each one glowed faintly, some blue, some golden, some deep, sleepy violet. Then she saw something new, a row of softly humming pods, like brass tulips turned upside down. Inside each, a tiny scene played out, flickering like dreamlight. She stepped closer to one. Within it, she saw a little boy, dropping a paper boat into a stream. His eyes were wide with wonder. His lips moved with a wish, though no sound came out. A small plaque below read, "The hour a child believed in magic." Elira gasped quietly. This wasn't just time. These were moments, moments no one had written down, moments that mattered, but passed unnoticed by the ticking world. She moved to the next one. An elderly woman sat in a chair by a window, petting a sleeping cat in her lap. Outside, snow drifted softly. She was smiling, and alone, but not lonely. The minute someone let go of sadness, Elira's chest filled with something warm, not quite tears, not quite laughter. This place didn't just hold time, it protected it. Moments too gentle for history books, too quiet for calendars, and it was listening to her. Because behind her, the hourglass stirred. The stardust inside began to swirl slowly, clockwise, then counterclockwise, as if tasting her presence. Then, a new door appeared, not with a creak, not with a bang, just a quiet folding open, like pages in a forgotten diary. Beyond it, a hallway lined with hundreds, maybe thousands of tiny clocks. Each one ticked with its own rhythm, but together they made music, not a song you could hum, but a feeling, like being wrapped in a blanket you didn't know you missed. Elira entered, her breath catching softly, Each clock had a name beneath it, not of people, but of feelings. Hope at dusk, courage in silence, a breath before forgiveness. Elira reached out, her fingertips brushing the face of a small clock. Its hands were frozen at 11:59. The plaque read, "The last minute of a promise." She could almost feel the weight of that moment, how fragile and precious it was, like a single feather caught in the breeze. A soft voice whispered again, from nowhere and everywhere at once. "Time is made of these moments, child, not hours or days, but memories, feelings, and the quiet spaces between." Elira nodded slowly. She understood now. This place was the heart of all forgotten time, and she, the Timekeeper's daughter, was meant to be its guardian. Elira lingered in the hallway, where hundreds of clocks sang their quiet songs, each one a fragment of a story left behind by someone, somewhere, long ago. The ticking was no longer just a sound. It was a language she was beginning to understand, a gentle rhythm that reached deep into her bones. She traced her fingers along the walls, feeling the cool metal of the gears embedded in the stones. The air smelled like damp earth mingled with warm wood, and a hint of something ancient, like pages in a forgotten library. Every breath she took felt like inhaling centuries of secrets. The hallway stretched on, but Elira's footsteps were slow, deliberate. She was afraid to rush, afraid to miss a single whisper of time's memory. The clocks flickered softly in the dim light, faces etched with numbers that no longer counted seconds but emotions, hope, longing, joy, regret. Elira came to a stop before a particularly ornate clock, its face carved with delicate vines curling around brass numerals. The hands were frozen at 11:59, and a plaque beneath it read, "The last minute of a promise." Her fingers hovered just above the glass. She imagined the person who had lived that moment, the heartbeat racing, the breath caught. The hope and fear mingled in the silence before the promise was broken or kept. The room hummed softly, and as if in answer, a voice brushed against her thoughts. It was gentle, ancient, and kind. "Time is not measured in hours or days alone, child. It is made of moments, fragile, fleeting, and precious. Moments that live in hearts, not just in clocks." Elira's eyes widened, and her heart swelled with a tender understanding. This place, the forgotten hour, was not a prison for time, but a sanctuary for what mattered most. The memories people forgot, the feelings they buried deep, the seconds they wished they could hold forever. She continued down the hallway, her steps muffled on the soft moss carpet that had somehow grown beneath her feet. Light filtered in from nowhere, casting soft shadows that danced like fireflies. At the end of the corridor, Elira found a door unlike the others. It was carved from rich mahogany, smooth and dark, with swirling symbols that seemed to shimmer under her gaze. There was no handle or keyhole, only a soft pulse that matched her own heartbeat. With a deep breath, she pressed her palm against the wood. The door responded, warming under her touch, humming a quiet welcome as it slowly opened inward, revealing a small, glowing room. The light inside was golden and soft, like the last rays of the sun slipping beneath the horizon. In the center of the room stood a table crafted from ancient oak, polished smooth by time. Resting upon it was a book unlike any Elira had ever seen. The cover was bound in worn leather, embossed with delicate patterns of gears and stars that twinkled faintly in the warm light. On its face were words written in silver ink, "The Book of Hours." Elira's fingers trembled slightly, as she reached out and opened the book. The pages turned themselves slowly, rustling like silk in the quiet room. Silver letters shimmered on the pages, telling stories that flowed like gentle rivers through her mind. These were stories of moments lost to the world, of laughter shared in the rain, of tears shed in silence, of love found beneath autumn leaves, and of goodbyes whispered with hope. Each story was a thread in the tapestry of time, woven from the delicate fabric of human experience. The book's voice spoke to her, not in words, but in feelings, a quiet melody that only her heart could hear. This book holds the stories of the forgotten hour, the space between past and future, where memories rest safe from the relentless march of seconds. You, Elira, are its guardian. You keep the moments others forget. Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the profound honor she felt. She was no longer just a girl from a village where time stood still. She was the keeper of something far greater, something eternal. The room seemed to pulse gently with life, the walls breathing with the stories contained within the book. Elira closed her eyes and felt the weight of every moment she had ever held dear, the warmth of her father's hand, the soft rustle of the village trees, the secret ticking that had called her here. The book closed slowly, as if satisfied. Elira knew she had a choice. She could stay here, in the warmth and safety of the forgotten hour. Or she could return to her village, carrying the memories and the responsibility of the Timekeeper's daughter. She stepped away from the table and looked back toward the door. The hallway stretched wide, beckoning her forward. A soft breeze brushed against her cheek, a breeze scented with wildflowers and rain. She smiled gently. Her journey was only beginning. As she walked back through the hallway of clocks, each ticking softly with stories and feelings, she felt the pulse of time in her veins. The ticking was no longer distant. It was part of her. And as she passed the door she had entered, the forest whispered again, "You belong to time now, Elira, to the moments forgotten, to the stories waiting to be told." She stepped outside into the fading light, the village silent around her. The golden hour stretched endlessly, but Elira's heart beat with the rhythm of the forgotten hour, a time that held all she loved and all she hoped to protect. The village was just the same when Elira returned, still silent, still paused in golden light, still wrapped in a hush that never lifted. But something inside her had changed. She now carried the ticking within her, not loud, but steady, like the soft beat of a bird's wing resting in her chest. She walked slowly through the cobbled square, past houses that hadn't aged in years, past windows that always held the same light. She felt the world tilt slightly, as if it had taken a breath for the first time in a very long while. And then she heard it again, not from inside her, but beneath her. A sound, so faint, so patient. Tick, tick, tick. Elira paused, closed her eyes, and listened. The sound was coming from beneath the old clock tower, from somewhere deep below the stone floor, somewhere no one had stepped in decades. She followed the sound, her feet quiet on the time-worn stairs. The walls around her were carved with faded symbols, symbols she had seen in the Book of Hours, spirals, stars, gears, little maps of forgotten time. At the base of the stairs, she found a small wooden door, nearly hidden behind a dusty tapestry. No one had opened it in years, but the ticking, it called her. She reached out, gently turned the brass handle, and stepped inside. What she saw took her breath in the softest way. It was a garden, underground, bathed in golden blue light that seemed to drift from the ceiling itself. The garden was filled with plants she didn't know, soft-leafed vines that glowed faintly, mushrooms that chimed when the air moved, petals that opened in rhythm with her breath. In the center, a tree, tall, still, ancient. Its bark shimmered like aged copper, and hanging from its branches were clocks, hundreds of them. Each one ticked softly, not in perfect unison, but like a gentle choir, a lullaby of time. Elira stepped closer. Some clocks were shaped like teardrops, others like stars. One looked like it was carved from a single pearl. Each had a memory within. As she walked past one, it whispered. The moment a mother saw her child walk for the first time, another whispered, the last words of a letter never sent. The tree didn't just carry time. It carried love, loss, longing, wonder, moments too soft for calendars, too important to be forgotten. She sat beneath the tree and closed her eyes. She listened to the ticking, to the breathing of the garden, to the slow, sleeping heartbeat of time itself. And then a voice came, not from the tree, but from the clock just above her head, a tiny one shaped like a crescent moon. It said gently, Elira, do you know why time chose you? She whispered, no, not yet. The voice continued, because you never asked it to hurry, because you sat still and listened when others rushed past. You saw the beauty in moments others missed. Elira opened her eyes. She felt a tear roll softly down her cheek, but it wasn't from sadness. It was from knowing. Knowing that even the smallest second, a held breath, a glance, a whispered wish, was sacred. The clocks above her swayed gently, as if nodding in agreement. The tree shimmered, and at its base, a key appeared, delicate, silver, just like the one she had found in her dream long ago. She picked it up. It pulsed softly in her palm. Not hot, not cold, just alive. Etched into its surface were the words, to open the moment between moments. She didn't know what that meant yet, but she would. And as she stood beneath that dreaming tree, surrounded by the quiet ticking of sacred time, she made a silent promise to protect the forgotten hour, to never rush the quiet, to always, always listen. Elira held the key in her hand as though it were made of sleep itself. It didn't glint like metal. It glowed softly, pulsing with a quiet rhythm. Not fast, not slow, just steady, like the way a baby breathes, or a candle flickers in a windless room. She traced the words etched into it once more. To open the moment between moments. What did it mean? What lay between the seconds, between the ticks of the clock, in the silence between two heartbeats? She looked up toward the clocks in the copper tree. They all seemed to lean slightly toward her now. Not physically, but in awareness. They were listening, waiting. And then she felt it. A soft warmth on the back of her neck. A breeze that wasn't a breeze. A shift in the air, as if the world had blinked. Time had opened a door. She turned slowly and saw it. A thin crack of golden light along the far wall of the garden. Not a door exactly, but something in between. A shimmer, a slice, like the space between sleep and waking, like the hush before a lullaby begins. The key pulsed gently, almost urging her forward, but never rushing. Nothing in this place rushed. She walked with silence in her steps, crossing the mossy ground beneath the ancient tree, past glowing flowers, past ticking mushrooms, until she reached the light. It hummed when she neared it, not loud, barely audible, but alive. She reached out with the hand holding the key. and as the silver metal touched the light, it melted open. There was no sound, no flash, just a shift. A passage appeared, dim, soft, lined with threads of floating time. They looked like strands of silk caught in sunlight, drifting in place, suspended in stillness. Elira stepped through, and the moment she did, she felt it. The moment between moments. It wasn't a place you could find on a map. It wasn't made of walls or sky. It was made of pause. The kind of pause that happens when someone inhales before saying, "I love you." The pause before a musician's fingers touch the piano. The silence before a raindrop falls. That's what this place was. And within it, memories hung in the air like floating lanterns. Some were bright, some were dim. All of them drifted slowly through the space, weightless, ageless. Elira reached out to one. It responded to her fingers with a ripple, revealing a memory inside. A child kneeling in the snow, trying to catch a snowflake on their tongue. Laughing, alone, but not lonely. She touched another. Two people, hands clasped, foreheads resting together, eyes closed. No words spoken, just a moment of pure being. This was where the moments waited when people were too distracted to feel them, when the world moved too quickly and time had no place to rest. This was where the seconds hid. Elira wandered deeper, floating more than walking, her breath slow, her body light. She found a silver ribbon drifting nearby, and when she touched it, she saw herself. Not now, not here, but a younger version, sitting by the fireplace in her old house, listening to her father fix a watch. The way he hummed, the way the gears clinked, the warmth of the tea in her hand. It was a memory she didn't even know she'd forgotten. Her eyes filled with tears. But they didn't fall. They simply shimmered in the quiet. The moment whispered to her, "Thank you for remembering me." She placed the ribbon back into the stream of moments, and it floated away, content. As she walked, the ticking changed. It was still soft, still slow, but now it sounded like breathing, like the gentle inhale and exhale of the universe itself. It felt comforting, familiar. And then she heard a new sound, a crackling, like pages being turned, but deeper, older. She followed it, and soon found herself in the center of this in-between place. A round platform floated there, made of light and mist. Above it, a large book hovered in the air. It was bound in midnight blue, with constellations stitched across its cover. The title read, "Moments That Almost Happened." Elira reached for it, and the moment her fingers touched the spine, 1,000 tiny memories spilled out around her. They swirled in golden spirals. A painter who almost finished their last canvas. A musician who almost shared their favorite song. A hand that almost reached for another in forgiveness. A goodbye that almost became a beginning. So many almosts. Elira whispered, "Why are they here?" And a gentle voice answered, the same one she had heard in the Book of Hours, but even softer now. Because no moment is ever truly lost, even those that were never lived. They come here to be held, to be remembered by someone brave enough to see them. Elira closed her eyes and gently placed her hands on the book. She let the almosts swirl around her. She welcomed them, not as failures, but as fragile, hopeful things. And in that quiet, the place between moments glowed warmer, like time itself had sighed in relief. For the first time in centuries, someone had listened, someone had cared. Elira stood in the center of the place between moments, where time drifted like silk, where memories slept in golden folds, and silence spoke more clearly than words ever could. The book of almosts hovered before her, still warm beneath her fingers. It pulsed gently like the soft thrum of a drowsy star, and all around her unlived moments whispered quietly, a sigh before a kiss never shared, a letter that remained unsent, a song hummed once, never sung again. They circled her slowly, not pleading, not crying, but simply existing, waiting to be known, waiting to be seen. Elira took a breath, deep and still, the kind of breath that feels like it belongs to the sky. She didn't feel sad. She felt still, perfectly, completely still. She stepped back from the book and bowed her head gently. "I remember you now," she whispered to the almosts. Her voice was like rain on glass, soft, sure, kind, and with those 4 words, the place between moments changed. A soft ripple passed through it, like the air itself exhaled. The golden threads floated higher, the light warmed, and far above her, the shape of a clock appeared, not like any ordinary clock. It had no hands, no numbers, only starlight circling its face, and at its center, a single glowing dot, a tiny sun. It pulsed once, then again, and then Elira felt it. Time was looking at her, not just watching, but seeing, truly seeing her. It wasn't like the gaze of a person. It was like being wrapped in the hush of snow, like being remembered by something ancient and gentle. She heard the voice again. "You are not lost, Elira. You are not forgotten. You are the keeper of what matters most. The breath between words, the stillness between waves, the heartbeat in the quiet." Tears slipped from her eyes, but they didn't fall. The air caught them, turned them into little stars, and set them drifting through the space between. And then, from the shimmering horizon of this in-between world, a pathway began to glow, pale blue, soft gold, lined with threads of memory. It curved gently forward, winding into the distance, through time, through feeling, through everything. At the path's edge sat a clock, but it wasn't ticking. It was listening. Elira stepped toward it. It opened, not with a sound, but with a breath. A doorway of woven light unfolded from its center. On the other side, the garden beneath the clock tower, the copper tree, the place she had left behind. But she knew something had changed. She hadn't just visited the moment between moments. She had become part of it. And now, it would walk with her, wherever she went. A quiet rhythm in her heart, a silver thread in her thoughts. She stepped through the doorway slowly, not afraid, not uncertain, just present. As she returned to the copper garden, the clocks on the tree chimed softly. One by one, their sounds layered gently in the air. Not loud, not clashing, just a song made of seconds. The tree seemed to stretch upward slightly, as if greeting her, or bowing. At its base, a new object now rested. A staff, tall, elegant, carved from wood the color of dusk, tipped with a crystal that shimmered like frozen time. She touched it. The moment she did, the ticking from within her chest merged with the world around her. The clocks, the moss, the garden, everything moved, not forward, not backward, just together. The voice whispered one last thing, fading into her heart like a lullaby. Wherever you walk, time will listen. Wherever you wait, time will bloom. You carry the forgotten hour within you now, and the world is ready to remember. Elira closed her eyes, letting the words settle into her bones. She was no longer just a girl. She was a rhythm, a memory, a keeper of seconds too soft for sound. And as she stood beneath the ticking tree, staff in hand, breath slow and deep, She smiled, because time had remembered her too. Elira stayed beneath the copper tree for a while, letting time breathe around her. It no longer passed her by. It flowed with her, inside her, beside her. She sat on the soft moss floor, her hands resting on the smooth staff now in her care. It felt warm in her palms, alive, like the quiet pulse of a secret. Above her the clocks ticked softly, but they didn't all tick in the same time. Each one was slow, gentle, and thoughtful. One ticked like a rocking chair on a porch, another like the flutter of wings, another like the inhale before saying goodbye. And in that soft stillness, Elira felt something stir, a memory, not of the forgotten hour, but from her life before. She closed her eyes, and there it was, her father, the clockmaker, bent over his desk in the soft candlelight, his fingers moving carefully, lovingly, placing tiny gears together, adjusting time with tenderness. He had always been quiet, not because he lacked words, but because he respected silence. He once told her, "Some clocks speak loudly, others whisper. The ones worth listening to are the ones you feel." She had forgotten that until now, but here, beneath this dreaming tree, the words returned to her like an old friend arriving at the door. She opened her eyes slowly, and there, resting against the tree's trunk, was something new, a small wooden box. It hadn't been there before. She was sure of it. It was simple, unmarked. But as she reached for it, the ticking of the tree grew quieter, as if holding its breath. She opened the lid. Inside, a pocket watch, but not just any watch. It was her father's, the one he wore every day, the one she used to fall asleep listening to as a child, its slow, calming tick like a lullaby wrapped in brass. But this time, it was open, and the inside was glowing. Elira lifted it carefully. The light shimmered from within the glass, not bright, not sharp, just enough to see a reflection, her father's face, smiling, calm, proud, and beside him, a younger version of Elira, eyes full of wonder, a clock spring in one hand, a gear in the other. It wasn't just a memory. It was a blessing, a gift passed from one keeper to the next. She held it to her chest and let it rest against her heart. The ticking blended with her breath, her pulse, her thoughts. She whispered, "Thank you." The box, now empty, slowly faded into the moss, returned to time, returned to stillness. Elira stood, her staff in one hand, the pocket watch tucked near her heart. And just then, a new path unfolded, lit not by lanterns, but by soft drifting starlight that shimmered down from the ceiling above. It led upward, spiraling gently, peacefully, like a lullaby written into the air. She followed without question, without fear, for now she knew time would always guide her feet. So long as she listened, the spiral path carried her upward, through tunnels lined with sleeping clocks, through domes that echoed softly with lullaby chimes, past stone walls etched with unreadable script, the language of the old clockmakers. She could feel their presence, not like ghosts, but like a breeze behind her shoulder, guiding, smiling, trusting her. At the top of the spiral path, a circular room awaited. Its walls were made of glass, clear, round, eternal. And outside, the stars, so close she felt she could breathe them in. They pulsed gently, not as stars, but as seconds. Each star, a moment, each moment, a light in the sky. In the center of the room was a single, round dial, empty, waiting. Elira stepped forward. The staff in her hand shimmered. The watch at her chest ticked in harmony. She knew what to do. She raised the staff, and gently placed it into the center of the dial. The room didn't shake. The stars didn't shout. Instead, the glass walls began to hum, and the stars outside tilted, not visibly, not dramatically, but like a curtain being drawn open, revealing the beginning of something, a quiet, unfolding. A soft awakening. Time was remembering itself. Elira stood still, letting the hush fill her completely. And then, the dial spoke, not in sound, but in light. It displayed a new hour, an hour that did not exist before, one not marked on clocks, not numbered by the world. But it was real, the forgotten hour, finally written, finally kept, because of her. Elira stepped back, feeling the peace bloom inside her like a slow sunrise. She looked up at the stars, at all the glowing moments drifting through the sky, and whispered, "I will carry you, every moment, every second too quiet to be heard. I see you now, I feel you, and I won't let the world forget again." And from the stars, a whisper returned, "Then time is safe." The stars still shimmered outside the glass walls, suspended in velvet darkness, unrushed, unbothered by the waking world. Elira stood quietly in the center of the starlit chamber. The staff no longer glowed in her hand. It had settled, its light folded inwards, resting like a flame that knew it was safe to sleep. The forgotten hour, once lost, once unnamed, now ticked gently beneath her feet. She could feel it, not like the ticking of a clock, but like the gentle beat of wings in the distance, or a lullaby hummed in another room. This hour didn't move quickly. It didn't hurry. It didn't count. It simply was. She walked slowly to the edge of the glass room, her bare feet silent on the smooth floor. The stars blinked at her softly, not as distant suns, but as moments. She recognized one, a golden star, hovering just to her left. Its glow pulsed slowly, like breath. Elira closed her eyes and reached toward it with nothing but thought. The star responded. And just like that, she was inside it, but not lost inside. She floated, carried gently into the memory it contained. A young boy stood on a wooden pier, staring into the water. He held a jar in his hand. Inside, a single firefly. His eyes were wide with wonder, but his heart was heavy. Elira could feel it. He was about to leave this place. His village, his lake, his fireflies. His family had to move. He whispered something to the firefly. Elira leaned closer in the dream. "I'll come back one day," he said, and opened the jar. The firefly rose, glowing, free. The boy didn't cry, but the moment did. Elira felt it, the quiet sorrow, the tender bravery. She whispered back to the memory, "Your moment is safe now." And like that, the star gently released her. She was back in the glass room, softly breathing, still. She now understood. The stars weren't just memories. They were trust, placed here by time itself, entrusted to the keeper, to her, because not every second could be carried by the world. Some were too delicate, too precious, too personal, and so they floated here, hidden from time's noise, safe in its silence. She turned again. The dial still glowed at the room's center. The forgotten hour had taken root. Its rhythm now matched hers. Elira stepped forward and sat beside it, not to command, not to control, but to listen. She closed her eyes again, letting her senses melt into the moment, and slowly, one by one, she heard them, the lost hours, the silenced minutes, the seconds no one ever noticed. They came gently. A mother kissing her child's forehead after a nightmare. A boy tying his father's old shoes before his first job interview. a girl whispering to a bird through her window, promising it she'd always leave crumbs, tiny, tender, timeless. Elira let them wash over her, soft as waves. She did not try to remember them all. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough to witness, to hold, sometimes. That's all a moment needs, to be held and known. And as she sat there, wrapped in the lullaby of time's forgotten treasures, the chamber shifted again. Above her, a new clock formed, not of wood, not of brass, but of light. It curved like a crescent moon, and at its center, nothing. No hands, no numbers, just a glowing heart. It pulsed with every breath Elira took. It was hers, and also not hers. It belonged to every moment she had ever cared for, every whisper she had ever heard, every silence she had respected. It was the clock of listening, and below it, something new grew from the floor. A table, but not just any table. It was carved from memory itself, made of laughter and lullabies, made of hugs never given and words almost spoken. The table held no objects, only space. Space for future moments, space for things not yet remembered, but already loved. Elira understood. She would not keep time in a box. She would not trap it in glass. She would make a space where it could breathe, where it could rest, where it could be free. Because time, real time, isn't made of ticking. It's made of feeling. And now, for the first time in centuries, time could feel again, because the timekeeper's daughter had listened, because she had walked gently, because she had honored the silence, and silence had bloomed. The clock of light hovered above Elira, breathing with her, not measuring time, but reflecting it, holding it, honoring it. Below it, the memory-carved table waited, silent, patient, ready to receive what the world no longer noticed. And as Elira stood by it, something happened that had not occurred in this chamber. In all the ages since time began listening, the silence sang, not loudly, not musically, but softly, like the hum of the universe itself, a vibration, a warmth, a deep knowing. Elira felt it travel up through the floor, into her bones, into the very thread of her breath. And with that soundless song, the chamber shifted. A ripple passed across the starlit glass walls. The stars outside began to move, not fast, not chaotic, but flowing like a calm tide returning home. It was as if time itself had sighed, a breath held for centuries, now gently released. And in that exhale, a path appeared, not made of stone, not made of stairs, but of light, spiraling softly away from the clock of light, leading upward, beyond the chamber, beyond the copper tree, beyond even the forgotten hour. Elira stepped closer to the edge of the path. It shimmered beneath her feet, not solid, but safe. The kind of path you find in dreams, the kind that doesn't ask you to run, only to walk with care. She looked behind her, at the room of glass and stars. It would always be there, not behind her, but within her. She was taking it with her, not the place, not the clocks, but the stillness, the knowing, the quiet song of time finally remembered. She stepped forward, one step, then another, and the light greeted her, not like a sunrise, but like a soft hand reaching for hers in the dark. The path rose slowly, curving gently upward, carrying her through the in-between. She passed scenes not yet written, moments floating like dandelion seeds in the air. A child singing to a flower, a stranger offering warmth to someone cold, an artist painting something they didn't understand, but loved anyway. The future was not fixed. It was not fast. It was soft, malleable, waiting to be shaped by kindness. She reached the top of the path and found herself standing in the old village square once more. But it was different now, not in how it looked. The cobblestones still shimmered with golden dusk. The buildings still leaned gently in sleep. The wind still sang through the leaves of the bell tree. No. The difference was inside her. Elira could feel everything. Every second the village had lived. Every whisper it had held in its soil. Every story it never had the voice to tell. And now, she could hear them all. The old baker who used to leave extra bread at doorsteps. The girl who had planted seeds behind the schoolhouse, even though no one ever noticed the flowers. The dog who waited at the same corner for a boy who never returned from war. These weren't just memories. They were moments, sacred, weightless, beautiful, and Elira could carry them, because she had become the keeper of what mattered most. Not days, not years, but seconds that held meaning. She walked through the village, staff in hand, watch ticking gently near her heart. People had always lived here, but time had never moved for them, until now. As she walked past the bakery, the candle in the window flickered. The flame leaned toward her, then stood tall. A breath, a whisper. The candle was remembering. She passed the well in the center of town. Its rope gently swayed, though no one pulled it. She could feel the laughter that once danced around its stones. Children had thrown coins there, not for wishes, but for games. That laughter still echoed. It had never left. It had only waited. Now as she walked, everything seemed to sigh. Not sadly, but peacefully. Time was waking. Not like a drumbeat, not like thunder, but like morning mist slipping off the shoulders of the world. The villagers still stood in pause, unaware that their hearts had begun to beat again. But soon, they would feel it. Elira reached the old clock tower. Its shadow stretched long across the square, pointing not to the past or future, but to this moment, right here, right now. She stepped inside. The gears hummed softly. She climbed the spiral staircase, one careful step after another, until she reached the very top, where the clock's face opened to the sky. From here, she could see the entire village, and beyond it, the forests, the river, the silver hills in the distance. The world wasn't frozen. It was waiting, not broken, just quiet. And now, it was listening. Elira stood at the edge of the tower, raised her staff slowly. The crystal at its tip began to glow, soft and golden, like the first light before dawn. She closed her eyes and let the forgotten hour flow from her chest, down through the staff, into the gears, into the walls, into the stones, and into the heart of the village. Time didn't rush in. It seeped, like warmth, like love, like the soft settling of snow. Windows blinked with golden light. Chimes whispered from doorways. Trees rustled with remembrance. And in the silence that followed, a single clock in the village square began to tick. Once, twice, then once more. Not to measure life, but to celebrate it. Time had returned. The sound of that first tick, the one that echoed through the village square, did not ring like a bell, nor crack like thunder. It whispered. It rustled, like wind through a curtain, like the hush that follows a long-forgotten prayer. Elira stood high in the tower, her eyes closed, her hands wrapped around the glowing staff, feeling the rhythm of the village return. One breath at a time. Down below, nothing visibly changed, not right away. The people still stood where they had always stood, frozen in time, mid-step, mid-word, mid-dream. But inside them, inside their quiet chests, hearts stirred, not jolting, not gasping, just a flutter, a feather of life returning. Elira could feel it, as if the very stones of the village had taken a deep breath. She opened her eyes. Outside, the stars were fading gently, not leaving, just dimming, so the sun could arrive. And what a gentle sun it was. A pale gold blush at the edge of the sky, soft as butter, tender as warm milk. It spilled across the rooftops, touched the leaves, brushed against the shutters of quiet homes. Time, it seemed, did not come back with noise. It came back with light. A single bird chirped from the beltree, just one. Testing the silence, Elira smiled. Below her, a dog stirred in its sleep, tail twitching, dreaming of open fields and the echo of voices it had once loved. And then, a child moved, just her fingers, twitching at first, then curling into a soft fist as if grabbing at something in her dream. Then, a blink, not wide-eyed wonder, not confusion, just a blink. A soul waking gently from a long and sacred nap. The village was not awakening like a world startled. It was waking like a garden, slow, natural, rooted in stillness. Elira descended from the clock tower, each step soft beneath her. The air no longer carried the weight of a frozen world. It shimmered with warmth, with motion, with possibility. As she reached the square, the child who had blinked earlier was now sitting, looking around, not afraid, just curious. She saw Elira and tilted her head, then smiled, as if to say, "I remember you," though she did not. Not in the way we remember names or places, but in the way a tree remembers spring, in the way water remembers the moon. The girl stood, took a step forward, and with that, time truly began again. A door opened at the bakery. Flour drifted from within. A soft laugh echoed from inside. The old man on the bench by the well shifted his cane, squinting up at the morning light as if trying to recall what day it was. Not because he forgot, but because days were returning, like birds after winter. And still, Elira did not speak. She didn't need to. Time was speaking for her now, with its soft ticks, with its golden hush, with the sound of a mother kissing her child's head, and a broom sweeping a porch, and a pan sizzling gently in butter. The forgotten hour had passed, but it had left its mark. It had stitched itself into the fabric of the village, not as something grand, but as something felt. The kind of hour that lives between pages of old books, between glances held too long, between the hush before sleep. And Elira? She was no longer just the daughter of the clockmaker. She was the keeper, the listener, the bridge between now and always. As the village returned to life, she walked through its streets, not hailed, not followed, not revered, just noticed. And that was enough. The shopkeeper nodded as she passed, though he didn't know why. The little girl reached for her hand, held it for a moment, then let go. No words exchanged, just warmth, just recognition, older than memory. And above them, the tower clock ticked on, but it did not measure hours like it once had. Now, it honored them, each tick a thank you, each talk a blessing. The villagers would not speak of the moment between moments. They would not remember the garden beneath the clock. They would not recall the way time had paused and breathed. But they would live softer. They would speak slower. They would listen more deeply. Because Elira had walked among the forgotten hours and brought them home. And now, whenever someone in the village took a deep breath, paused to feel the sun on their face, or whispered, "I love you," into the quiet, the forgotten hour ticked once more. Not loudly, just enough. Elira left the village square behind. The tower clock still ticked above her, not in urgency, but in peace. Each sound like a sigh, like a story being told slowly, one syllable at a time. She walked with no destination, only listening. Her feet carried her past shops and window panes, past vines curling around porch rails, past doorways that held the echo of welcome. And then she saw it, the old path to her family's house. It had been overgrown when she last walked it, the stones cracked, the gate leaning. But now the path had straightened itself. Moss still lined it gently, but no longer in chaos. It looked remembered. Elira paused at the gate, ran her hand across the old wood. Her fingers met a small carving. She'd made it as a child, a sun with little rays, carved with a spoon when no one was watching. She smiled. It was still there, worn, faded, but still hers. She opened the gate. It didn't creak, not because it was new, but because it trusted her. The garden around the house had begun to breathe again. Vines no longer choked the windows. Instead, they climbed gently, like lullabies finding their way back to song. She stepped onto the porch. The floorboards gave a soft, low sound beneath her feet. Not groaning, just greeting. She reached for the door. Its handle was cool, familiar. When she turned it, the door opened inward, as if the house had been waiting. The air inside was thick with memory, not dust, not decay, but memory. The kind that lives in the corners of rooms, in the folds of curtains, in the scent of wood warmed by sunlight. She stepped in, and time exhaled. The ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hall resumed softly, a rhythm so gentle she nearly mistook it for her own heartbeat. She passed her father's chair, its cushion still slightly indented, as if he'd only just stood. His workbench sat by the window, cluttered with tiny gears, thin screwdrivers, half-dismantled timepieces. Everything just as he left it, only now, alive. She reached out, touched the old watch he had once tried to fix for days, then left unfinished. She had often asked, "Why didn't you finish it?" And he had always replied with a smile, "It's waiting for something." She lifted it from the table, turned it in her hands, and now she saw it, inside the face. A tiny marking she'd never noticed, an engraving, EM, her initials. It had been for her, not to tell time, but to remind her of it, of what time really meant. She opened the back of the watch and gently placed the smallest of the glowing gears from her pocket inside, a leftover piece from the Copper Garden's ticking tree. The watch clicked, once, twice, then began to hum, not loudly, just a soft, steady breath. It was complete now, not as a machine, but as a message. Elira placed it on the table, let it tick there in the house that had once slept. She walked to her old room. The door opened without resistance. The air inside was lavender soft. Her bed still sat beneath the window, the quilt folded neatly at the end. A small stuffed owl lay in the corner, eyes faded, threadbare wings. She picked it up, cradled it against her chest. Its scent was home. She sat on the edge of the bed, let her eyes roam the ceiling where she once imagined stars. The sky beyond the window was turning blush-colored now, morning blooming slow and sweet. Time passed differently here now, not faster, not slower, but truer. Elira lay back on the bed, letting her eyes close. She did not sleep. She simply rested. And in her stillness, the house sighed. It did not need repairs. It did not ask for change. It only needed this, her presence. The keeper returned, and time could breathe again within these walls. From outside, a wind passed through the village. It rustled the trees, lifted laundry left to dry, carried scents of baking bread, of spring flowers, of rain that hadn't yet arrived. It carried stories, too, of a girl who had listened, who had walked gently, who had not tried to control the hours, only keep them safe. She had not bent time. She had cradled it. And now the world was whispering again. It did not speak in sentences. It spoke in feelings. The warmth of sunlight on old stone. The rhythm of hands kneading dough. The pause before someone speaks your name. Those were Time's words, and Elira had learned to read them. The room wrapped her like a memory, not like a cage, not like a burden, but like a blanket that had waited patiently for her return. Elira lay there on the same bed she once dreamed upon, her body cradled by the soft mattress, her eyes half closed. She wasn't tired. Not exactly. It was a different kind of stillness, a sacred kind, the kind that comes after something ancient is set right. Outside, the early morning breeze brushed the window panes. It carried the sound of birds waking slowly, stretching their wings into the light of the newly moving world. A soft creak in the hallway made her sit up, not out of fear, not even surprise, but recognition. Footsteps, gentle, measured, careful, but not cautious. Someone moved in the old house, as if testing each floorboard, making sure time still lived in the grain of the wood. She rose from the bed, feet bare on the smooth wooden floor. The owl plush still sat where she'd left it, watching, smiling. She stepped into the hallway. The light there was golden, filtered through the thin lace curtains her mother had once sewn by hand. They fluttered faintly, as if stirred by breath rather than wind. The footsteps continued, soft as snow. And then she saw him, standing in the kitchen doorway, her father. Not older, not younger, just as she remembered. His eyes warm, his fingers stained with the oils of gears and springs, his clothes simple and familiar. He was looking at her as if no time had passed at all, and yet as if he had waited through centuries. Neither of them spoke, because there was no need to. The moment itself said everything. He stepped aside, gestured gently toward the kitchen. She entered. The room was sun-dappled. Steam rose from a kettle. A small wooden plate sat on the table, with warm bread and the faint scent of honey. It was like a memory made real. He sat across from her, still no words, only quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't empty, the kind that's full of understanding. He poured tea for them both. The sound of liquid meeting porcelain was the loudest thing in the room, and even that sounded like a sigh. He pushed the small watch across the table, the one she had placed the gear into, the one he had never finished. Now it ticked, perfectly. He looked at it, then at her. Then he smiled, a small, proud smile, the kind that isn't made of lips, but of soul. And then he said, "You heard it, didn't you?" Elira nodded. Her voice, when it came, was soft and low. It was never lost. Just waiting. He nodded, eyes full. The world forgets. It always does. But the hours, they never stop whispering. Someone just has to be quiet enough to hear them. A pause, long, comfortable. He sipped his tea. She sipped hers. The warmth of the mug reminded her of holding his hand as a child, back when he would walk her through the village, naming every sound they heard. "That's the bell tower," he would say. "That's the baker's wheelbarrow. That's the sound of a promise someone hasn't made yet." She thought he was just being poetic. Now she knew. He was listening. All along. He reached into his vest pocket, pulled out something small, delicate, a key, its handle shaped like a clock's minute hand, its teeth curved gently like vines. He placed it on the table. This is for the door that doesn't yet exist. Elira frowned slightly, curious. Where does it lead? Her father smiled. Wherever time needs to hide, it changes. You'll know when you find it. And when you do, you won't need the key. You'll be the door. She touched the key, felt a pulse, not mechanical, not magical, something older, something true. Then quietly, he rose, not suddenly, not dramatically, just gently, the way leaves fall, the way clocks slow. He walked to the doorway, looked back at her one last time. You've kept the hour well, Elira. Don't forget, the quiet ones are the ones that matter most. And with that, he stepped beyond the light. Gone, not vanished, not taken, just returned. Elira sat there for a long time, the tea now lukewarm, the sun spilling slowly across the floor, the key still resting under her fingers. She closed her eyes, listened, and the house sang. Elira remained at the kitchen table, her fingers curled around the little silver key, its weight light, but its meaning infinite. The room had grown quiet again, not the empty kind of quiet, but the kind that wraps you in warmth, the kind that makes you feel that everything is exactly as it is meant to be. The teacups sat where they had been. The bread on the plate, now slightly cooled, held the scent of honey and memory. She stood slowly, sliding the key into the little satchel at her side. The watch still ticked on the table, its rhythm matching her breath. She would leave it here. It belonged in this house. It had waited long enough. She stepped into the hallway again, past the lace curtains, past the hallway clock now ticking in soft harmony, and out the door. The morning was brighter now, not harsh, not sharp, just awake. Sunlight kissed the cobblestones. Windows creaked open. A broom swept a porch. Time was moving, but it no longer rushed. It strolled. And so did she. Her feet took her past the village bakery, where a man with flour on his sleeves nodded and said nothing. He didn't need to. His eyes held recognition, not of who she was, but of what she had done. A cat curled in the window of the tailor's shop. It blinked once, yawned, and rolled over. The bell in the square chimed once, not marking the hour, just marking a moment. Elira followed the stone path to the edge of the village, where the wild began. And there, beneath a low hill, was the gate, an old one, covered in ivy, half forgotten. The kind of gate no one really noticed, even though they passed it often. But Elira saw it now, clearly, because she had changed, and once you listen to time, it begins to show you what others cannot see. She opened the gate. It didn't groan. It sighed. The path beyond was narrow, lined with moss and soft light. She followed it. Every step deeper into the quiet, deeper into something older than the village, older than clocks, older than memory. The trees thickened. The light grew golden. And then she saw it. The garden. Not the one in the clock chamber, not the tree of ticking gears, but a new garden, or perhaps an ancient one returning. There were no signs, no gates, no instructions, only stillness, only the feeling that time had paused here, not by accident, but out of reverence. She stepped into it. Grass so soft it felt like breath. Flowers that moved only slightly as if bowing. No sounds, except the faintest trickle of water from a spring somewhere unseen. In the center of the garden, a stone bench, uncarved, untouched, pure. She sat, and as she did, the air shifted, gently, as if the garden recognized her, as if it had been waiting for the one who could hear its silence. She reached into her satchel and removed the key, held it in her palm. It shimmered slightly, catching the light in ways that felt impossible. She closed her eyes, waited, and the garden began to hum. Not loudly, just enough. The kind of hum you don't hear with ears, the kind you feel behind your ribs, a deep stillness. And then, without warning, without effort, a door appeared. Not a door of wood, not metal, not stone, a door of air. It shimmered like heat above pavement or moonlight on deep water. She did not need the key. The key had simply helped her arrive. She was the door now. Elira stood, stepped forward, touched the shimmer, and walked through. Inside. Nothingness, but not darkness, not cold. It was a warm, endless hush, like standing inside a thought before it becomes a word. She felt no fear, only weightlessness. And then, the voices, not loud, not many, just a few, clear, kind. Keeper, listener, you've brought the hour home. They weren't voices of people, not ghosts, not ancestors. They were the voices of time itself, the hours that had never been lived. The moments paused before they could begin, the seconds that slipped between heartbeats. They circled around her, not to test, not to judge, but to thank. And then, a question. Will you keep more? Elira nodded slowly. Yes. Not all clocks must be fixed. Not all time must be known. Some must simply be kept quietly. She placed her hand over her heart. The staff glowed faintly at her side. Then I will be the keeper of what goes unnoticed. The hush deepened, not in silence, but in peace. And slowly, Elira felt herself return. Not pulled, not pushed, just released. The shimmer faded. She stood again in the garden, the bench behind her, the breeze gentle on her skin. She looked up. Above her, the sky turned a color no one had named, and in her pocket, the key glowed once, then dimmed, its purpose fulfilled. Elira stood in the garden where the air shimmered just moments ago. She placed the small silver key back into the satchel at her side, but it felt different now, cooler, quieter, at rest. It had opened a door, not just in space, but in her understanding. The path beneath her feet welcomed her return, mossy, green, scattered with petals that had fallen during her absence. And as she stepped forward, the garden behind her did not vanish. It simply folded inward, like a secret shared between old friends. She walked through the woods slowly, letting each breath settle, letting her shoulders grow light. Every tree bowed slightly, as if acknowledging her presence in the oldest language known to time. One without words. When she emerged once more from the woods, the village came into view. Still peaceful, still soft, still alive. Children now played near the square, chasing golden leaves caught in the breeze. The bell in the tower chimed once, not to call anyone, not to declare the hour, but simply to say, I'm still here. Elira passed a baker offering warm rolls. He smiled gently, then placed one in her hand without a word. She bowed her head slightly in thanks. The roll was warm in her fingers, soft and fragrant, like morning and memory wrapped together. She took a bite, and time seemed to pause just to let her savor it. No one rushed in this village anymore, because now they felt the seconds as they passed, not counted, but lived. Elira continued toward the small stone building just beyond the square. It had once been forgotten, a storage place, a quiet room where things were put aside, clocks no longer used, journals no longer read, timepieces waiting to be repaired. But now, it was hers. The people had started calling it the listening house, because no one ever heard shouting from within. No tools clanged, no gears crashed, only whispers, only ticking, only breath. She stepped inside. The room was bathed in soft shadow, Filtered sunlight poured in through tiny round windows. On the walls, dozens of clocks rested, all silent. Not broken, just still. She walked slowly to each one, paused, listened. Some would not tick again, and that was okay. Not everything in time needed to move. Some moments needed to sleep. Others needed to wait. And a few, just a few, needed someone to notice they had ever existed. That was her work now. Not to fix, not to restore, to keep, to protect, to witness. Elira lit a candle on the low table in the center of the room. Its glow flickered softly against the brass edges of the sleeping clocks. She placed the satchel on a wooden hook, removed the staff from her back, leaned it carefully beside the chair. Then she sat and waited, not for a task, not for a request. She simply listened, and as she did, they came, the moments, not as visions, not as ghosts, but as feelings. A man standing alone on a bridge, watching the fog roll over water, thinking of a name he'd never spoken aloud. A child drawing a picture of the moon, too shy to show anyone, yet hoping someone would find it. An elderly woman folding linens with the care of someone who remembers what each thread has been through. Tiny, trembling, tender. They visited her quietly. She did not catalog them, did not try to remember them all. She simply held space, a room where these forgotten seconds could rest, where they didn't have to matter to anyone else, only to themselves. She whispered gently, a phrase she now said often, "You are safe here." The clocks around her ticked once, then fell silent again. That was enough. Not every tick needed to start a minute. Some were just sighs. Some were just songs that only time could hear. As the candle burned low, Elira rose. She moved to the back of the listening house, where a garden of her own had begun to bloom. Not like the magical copper garden, but something just as sacred. Here, she grew time not in gears, but in seeds. Lavender, mint, chamomile, sage, plants that soothed. That slowed the heart, that helped people remember the softness of the world. She crouched beside the tallest stalks, brushed her fingertips across them. A bee hovered, unhurried, focused, free. She smiled. Even the bees knew this was not a place to rush. Back inside, she returned to her chair, took out a small book, worn leather, pages yellowed but strong. This was where she kept her favorite hours, not in numbers, not in ink, but in sketches. She turned to a blank page, began to draw. A single moment, caught like a leaf in still water, the child and the firefly, the boy who didn't cry, the promise that lingered in the jar. Her lines were soft, her pencil barely whispering against the paper. When the drawing was done, she placed her hand gently on the page, closed her eyes, and whispered again, "You are safe here." The days in the village were different now, not because everything had changed, but because everything had settled. Time had returned, but it did not demand attention. It did not rattle clocks or rush footsteps. Instead, it moved softly through the village, like the breeze between pages, like warmth soaking into old wood. Elira walked through the listening house each morning, fingers brushing the silent clocks on the walls, not to wind them, but to remember them, to let them know, "I see you, I hear you, even in stillness, you matter." She had become a quiet part of the rhythm here, not a guardian with power, but a keeper with peace. One morning, as she tidied the shelves near the hearth, her fingertips brushed against a narrow leather-bound book she had never seen before. Its spine bore no title. No dust clung to it. It wasn't new. It wasn't old. It simply was. She opened it carefully. The pages inside were blank, but not empty. Each page shimmered faintly, like breath against glass, as if they were waiting for something to be written. But only when the moment was ready, she turned to the last page, and there, pressed into the parchment, soft as a memory, was a symbol, a small spiral, the same one that had once glowed at the base of the copper tree in the forgotten hour. Her breath caught. She looked up, and the room had changed, not with noise, not with flash, but with feeling. The walls around her melted gently into shadow. The floor beneath her softened until it felt like velvet cloud. The listening house faded, and she stood now, in the library between seconds. It was not built of stone. It had no roof. It stretched infinitely in every direction, shelves curling upward like spiral staircases, filled not with books, but with moments. Tiny glass orbs rested on each shelf, glowing faintly. Some pulsed like heartbeats. Others lay still like sleeping stars. Each orb was a second, a breath, a whisper. Elira stepped forward. The floor beneath her feet glowed softly with each step, welcoming her. Above her, a great clock hung in the sky, its hands unmoving. Time here did not tick. It breathed. Each moment in this place had been saved, not because it was grand, but because someone had once felt it, and not let it go. She reached out to one of the orbs, held it in her hand, and suddenly, the moment bloomed. A boy pressing a flower between two pages, a grandmother brushing snow from a child's eyelashes, a couple standing under a lamppost, saying nothing, but saying everything. Then it dimmed again, but it was still alive, still held. She placed it back and whispered, "You are safe here." She moved from shelf to shelf, letting her presence touch the memories gently, like fingertips on wind chimes. She passed one orb, and it glowed suddenly in her presence. Drawn to her, she picked it up, and this time, she saw herself, younger, sitting at her father's desk, disassembling a clock without knowing how to put it back together. She had cried, felt she'd ruined something precious. But then, her father's hands appeared in the memory, gently wrapping around hers. No scolding, no anger, only a soft voice saying, "Now you've opened it. Let's listen to what it has to say." Tears welled up in her eyes now, as the orb pulsed gently, then dimmed again. It too had been kept. She placed it back and continued. Hours passed in the library, or none at all, because here there were no hours, only feelings, only breath. She came to a small table at the center of the vast hall. Upon it, a book, bound in soft fabric, stitched with silver thread. It was open to a blank page. A quill hovered above it. No ink, no inkwell, just readiness. She sat, took the quill in hand, and closed her eyes. And then, she began to write, but not from thought, from memory, from emotion, from the hush inside her chest. She wrote of the belfry in the square, the hush of the copper garden, the shimmer of the door that wasn't real, the tick of a broken watch that had always known how to heal. The words, "You are the door." And as she wrote, the spiral on the cover of the book began to glow. Her words weren't just recorded, they were preserved, placed gently on the shelf of moments too quiet for the world to remember, but too beautiful to be lost. When she finished, the quill lowered itself. The book closed, and the library whispered, "Thank you, Elira." She stood, felt the space shimmer around her, and just like that, the listening house returned. She was once more in her chair, the clocks around her still asleep, the candle flickering beside her, but in her heart, she carried the library, every moment she had seen, every breath she had felt, every orb that had whispered, "I was here." She pressed her hand to her chest, listened, and heard not the ticking of clocks, but the soft hum of time remembered. The village woke slowly the day after Elira returned from the library. But not because it was tired, not because it had slept too long. It woke slowly because it could, because nothing was rushing it anymore. Children played in the dirt paths, their laughter not shrill, but soft, scattered gently like dandelion seeds in the air. The bakery's windows steamed as the warmth of fresh bread spread out onto the street like a scent-shaped song. And Elira? She sat on the stone steps of the listening house, a cup of warm tea in her hands, watching the world move at a pace she had helped restore. Birds darted from rooftop to rooftop, chirping soft melodies that matched the rhythm of the breeze. A wheelbarrow passed. Wood creaked, wheels turned, pebbles clinked under its weight. Each sound was like a page turning. Even the silences had texture. Some silences held peace, some held memory, and some held questions that would never need answers. Elira had learned how to tell them apart. A boy passed her carrying a bouquet of wildflowers, his little hands barely managing to hold them all. He stopped, looked at her, and handed her one. A small blue bloom, edges tipped in white, as if it had dipped its toes into cloud. She took it with a soft, "Thank you," and tucked it behind her ear. The boy smiled. A smile with no purpose, no transaction, just being. And then he ran off again, the way children do when they don't know they've changed someone's day. She sat for a long time after that, just breathing. The kind of breathing that isn't just lungs. It's presence. It's belonging. It's the sound your soul makes when it doesn't feel alone anymore. The village square began to fill slowly, not with crowds, but with presence. A woman sketching quietly on a bench, a pair of older men playing a slow game of chess, their every move made with intention and care. A dog sleeping in a sunny patch of grass, dreaming, its paws twitching gently in sleep. Elira closed her eyes. She could feel time now in everything, not as a clock, as a companion. Each breath beside her, each whisper of wind through the trees. Time was not watching her. Time was sitting beside her, kind, still, listening. She whispered softly, to no one, or maybe to everything. You don't need to be measured. You just need to be noticed. The wind stirred her hair, as if replying. She stood slowly, stretched like a tree greeting morning, and wandered gently through the village paths, past windows filled with plants, past doorways with shoes carefully set aside, past fences hung with drying herbs, their fragrance weaving invisible trails through the air. As she walked, she saw how the people had changed, not on the outside, but in their pace, their posture, their pauses. They paused now, to look, to feel, to hear a distant sound and wonder where it came from. They had learned, perhaps without knowing, how to hear what wasn't being said. She smiled. The forgotten hour had not erased the past. It had gently rearranged the way the future would unfold. She arrived at the hilltop, the same one where the clock tower could be seen rising against the sky like a guardian made of stone and breath. She sat in the tall grass, watching the slow spin of weather vanes, the shift of clouds, the ripple of sunlight across rooftops. And then, from her satchel, she removed the book, the blank-paged one, the one that shimmered. She opened it. New pages had appeared, but they were not filled with words. They held textures. She touched one. It felt like laughter. Another, like the silence between raindrops. One page made her feel exactly how she had felt the first time she heard the ticking in her sleep. Not the sound, but the feeling behind it. She closed the book gently. No ink would ever be enough. This book didn't want to be written in. It wanted to be carried. It wanted to be near the one who could hear time sigh. And Elira was that person now. Not chosen, not marked, simply ready. She lay back in the grass, watched the sky turn the soft blue that only happens when the day is full but not yet tired. Around her, insects danced like thoughts. Birds passed overhead in silent arcs. The breeze stirred stories it didn't need to tell aloud, and Elira whispered to the sky, "You don't need to move fast to be full of wonder." She closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to listen, to hear the day that asked nothing of her, not even attention, only presence. And time? It curled beside her, folded gently into her breath, like a cat on a windowsill, like a friend who knows you don't always need to talk. That evening, Elira returned to the listening house, just as the sky began to turn the color of steeped lavender. The sun draped the rooftops in long golden sighs, warm and lingering, like a goodbye that wasn't sad. Inside, the clocks rested as always. But tonight, the quiet felt different. It was deeper, not heavier, just more still, as if the air itself was waiting to listen. She lit a single candle. Its flame flickered like a heartbeat, steady and soft. She moved to the chair in the corner, the one by the tall window, and sat with the book again in her lap. No writing, no reading, only being. She held the book to her chest and looked outside. The world was dissolving into night, not vanishing, but transforming, one lantern at a time, a flicker here, a flicker there. Soon the village below glowed gently, like fireflies caught in glass. From somewhere beyond the hills, an owl called once. Its sound traveled like a ripple through the leaves. Elira listened, and after a long while, she heard something new, a thread, faint, winding, barely audible. It wasn't a sound, not quite. It was more like a presence wrapped in music. It pulled softly at her chest, not demanding, but inviting. She stood, took only what she needed, the book, the key, and the quiet. She left the house without shoes, feeling the earth beneath her toes, cool and familiar, like an old lullaby remembered in a dream. The thread guided her, not with light, not with maps, with feeling. It led her past the square, now hushed and asleep, past the houses where candles glowed behind sleepy windows, down an old stone path half forgotten by most, overgrown with ivy, but still kind beneath her steps. At the edge of the woods she paused, listened again. Yes, the thread was clearer now, and then she saw her, a woman, standing among the trees, tall, cloaked in soft gray fabric, hood drawn low over her brow. She was not old, and not young, not a stranger, but not familiar either. She was like the hour between night and morning, the one most people sleep through without ever knowing they missed it. Elira stepped forward. The woman raised her hand slowly, and the thread between them pulsed gently. Elira understood. She didn't need words. The woman spoke anyway, but her voice, it didn't sound like one voice. It sounded like many voices, layered gently, like wind through a forest. You've kept time. Now you must carry the thread. Elira tilted her head slightly. The woman continued. There are places the hours don't go. Corners of the world where time forgets to breathe. Moments that slip, fall, scatter. They gather in silence, waiting for someone to hold them. She extended her hand. A small spindle rested in her palm. It shimmered like silver moonlight, wound tightly with a translucent thread. so fine, so delicate, that it barely seemed real. But Elira could feel its weight, its truth. "This is not to weave time," the woman said. "It's to listen to it, to walk with it, when it's too quiet to be seen." Elira accepted the spindle, and as she touched it, she saw them, fleeting memories, caught in the thread. A mother folding a baby's blanket long after the child has grown. A musician playing the last note of a song no one else heard. A whisper exchanged in the dark before one goodbye. The thread held them all, soft, unspoken, uncelebrated, yet essential. "Where do I go?" Elira asked. The woman's many-voiced answer came gently. "You don't. You listen, and time will take you." Elira bowed her head, pressed the spindle to her heart. The thread pulsed, and the woman was gone, not vanished, just woven in. Elira stood in the starlit woods for a long while, holding the thread, feeling its heartbeat, its tremble, then turned back toward the village, carrying something more delicate than ours. She was not just a timekeeper now. She was a thread-bearer. She was a thread-bearer, a weaver of moments too soft for the world to notice, but not too small for her. Back in her small home behind the listening house, Elira sat beside a window that framed the sky like a painting made of silence. Stars shimmered outside, their light delayed, but never late. They were messengers of moments so ancient, they felt like lullabies from the beginning of time. The spindle rested in her hands now. The thread around it glowed faintly. No brighter than a sigh, no louder than the hush before a dream. She could feel it, not tugging, but asking to be carried, to be held, to be honored. She lit a lantern beside her. Its golden light curled around the shadows and softened them. Then she opened the small wooden drawer beneath the windowsill. Inside it, needles, twine, folded fabric, scraps of thread from dresses long outgrown, memories. But tonight she would not stitch cloth. She would stitch moments. She removed a blank panel of soft linen, pale, untouched. The spindle pulsed once, as if it approved. She threaded the needle with the translucent strand. The thread itself seemed to hum, not in sound, but in feeling, and Elira began to weave, not in patterns, not in pictures. She stitched stillness. A mother's hand pausing on a child's cheek. The pause in a story when everyone leans in. The breath between thunder and rain. Her hands moved slowly, with reverence. With each stitch, she remembered the woman in the forest, the voice that was not just one voice, the moment that had asked, "Will you carry the forgotten?" She had said yes, and so now she did, stitch by stitch. The thread ran out halfway across the linen, but that was enough. The cloth did not need to be full, only true. She folded it carefully, wrapped it in soft cotton, and placed it on the shelf beside the listening book. No label, no name, only presence. Outside, the wind turned colder, but her room remained warm. She poured herself a cup of lavender tea, steam curling upward like whispers too soft to catch. Then she walked outside again, barefoot, as always. The earth cool and grounding. The sky above was a sea of stars now, a map of breaths. She followed the path behind the listening house where the wild garden grew. The plants here were quiet companions. They did not demand. They did not bloom to be seen. They simply grew. Elira moved between the rows, touching each plant gently, thanking it in silence. She whispered to the mint. She hummed beside the sage. And when she reached the chamomile, she sat down beside it, closed her eyes, and let the stillness rise. The spindle rested in her lap. The linen remained folded indoors, but she carried them both inside her. And as she sat, she began to hum, not a melody from memory, not a song learned from others, a hum made of presence, a sound that said, "I am here. I am listening. I will keep you." And something in the ground seemed to answer, a shift, a murmur, a low ancient thrum, like the earth exhaling. Elira smiled. She didn't need to understand it. She just needed to sit with it. And so she did, until the stars turned just slightly, until the wind told her gently, "It's time." She stood again, returned to her room, placed the spindle beside her bed, lay down slowly beneath a hand-stitched quilt, closed her eyes, and whispered to the ceiling, to the air, to time itself, "Even if no one remembers, I will." Morning came with no fanfare, just the soft glow of amber light spilling across the wooden floors of the listening house. A bird chirped once, then again, not loudly, not insistently, just enough to say, "I'm awake, too." Elira opened her eyes to the silence of belonging. The spindle was still at her bedside. The folded cloth lay undisturbed on the shelf. The listening book, closed and breathing softly, seemed to rest. She sat up slowly, stretched her arms, touched the floor with bare feet, and listened. Time was breathing. The world was calm. No ticking, no rush, no wait, only space. She rose, washed her face with cool water, and placed a sprig of lavender in her pocket. A small ritual, not necessary, but meaningful. Outside, the path to the clock tower shimmered with dew. Every blade of grass bowed under tiny droplets, glistening like quiet stars fallen to earth. Elira walked slowly. The village barely stirred, but she didn't need it to. She was walking now to the place that had once held the forgotten hour, not to awaken it, but to say goodbye. Not every hour needs to remain open. Some are meant to sleep after their song has been sung. At the base of the tower she paused, ran her hand along the stone, still rough, still old, still present. Inside she ascended slowly, step after step, listening to the echo of her movements. It wasn't lonely. It was sacred. The clock room greeted her as it always had, but the tree of copper gears was no longer glowing. It stood still, unmoving, at peace. Elira approached it, placed her palm against its trunk, and closed her eyes. She whispered, "Thank you for opening me. Thank you for trusting me. You can rest now." No reply came, but the silence deepened, and sometimes that's what gratitude sounds like. She stepped back, took the silver key from her pocket. It no longer shimmered, but it pulsed softly, once, then stilled. She placed it at the base of the tree, a final offering. It belonged here, in this hour, in this room that had given her everything, by asking only that she listen. As she turned to leave, she felt it, a presence, not outside of her, within, the hour. It hadn't vanished. It lived now in her breath, in the stillness she carried, in the cloth folded on her shelf, in the thread woven through memory. She descended the stairs, not with sadness, but with fullness. She had not lost anything. She had simply returned it to where it had always belonged. Outside, the village had begun to stir, not with noise, with life. A girl skipped past, dragging a string of bells. A baker dusted flour from his apron. A musician tuned an old violin in the warmth of his doorway. The world did not know what she had done. It didn't need to. That was never the point. Elira walked to the square, took her place beside the bell tree, sat on the bench carved with spirals, and closed her eyes. She listened to the children playing, to the hum of honeybees, to the quiet behind the clouds. And then In her heart, she heard something else. A ticking, not of a clock, not mechanical, not even steady. It was the ticking of presence, the sound time makes when it knows it's being loved. She opened her eyes, and for the first time since her journey began, she felt seen by the moment itself. Time was not something to fix, not something to chase. It was something to sit beside, to sip tea with, to watch birds with, to walk in silence with. Time didn't want to be controlled. It wanted to be witnessed. And Elira, she had become its most faithful companion. Epilogue. A note left in the listening book, in a whisper. To the one who finds this page. If you are holding this book, you already know how to listen. You may not believe it. You may not be ready. But you've heard it. The whisper between hours. If you ever feel the world move too fast, if you ever feel forgotten by the tick and the rush, come to the hill, sit by the tree, close your eyes. Time will find you. And when it does, tell it, I'm here. E. Threadbearer, Timekeeper, daughter of stillness.